The story of the state of Mississippi begins long before it was ever given a name, before borders were drawn, before flags were raised over its lands. It begins with water, slow-moving, powerful, and eternal. The Mississippi River, one of the greatest waterways on earth, carved its path through the heart of North America, and in doing so, shaped everything that would come to define the land that now bears its name. For thousands of years, long before European explorers ever set foot in the region, the land that would become Mississippi was home to thriving Native American civilizations. These early peoples lived in harmony with the land, understanding the rhythms of the river and the cycles of the seasons. The Mississippi River was not merely a body of water to them, it was a lifeline. It provided food, transportation, fertile soil, and a deep spiritual connection to the natural world. Among the most notable of these early cultures was the Mississippian culture, a complex and advanced society that flourished between approximately 800 AD and 1600 AD. They built vast settlements, including large ceremonial mounds made of earth, some of which still stand today as silent witnesses to their ingenuity and organization. These mounds were not random constructions, they were carefully designed centers of political, religious, and social life. The people who built them were skilled farmers, traders, and craftsmen, connected by an extensive network that stretched across much of the southeastern United States. As the centuries passed, these societies evolved, adapted, and in some cases declined, leaving behind traces of their existence in the soil and in the stories passed down through generations. By the time European explorers arrived in the 16th century, the land was inhabited by tribes such as the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Natchez, each with their own traditions, languages, and ways of life. The arrival of Europeans marked a turning point in the history of the region. In 1540, the Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto led an expedition into the southeastern United States, becoming one of the first Europeans to encounter the Mississippi River. His journey was marked by conflict, disease, and hardship, both for his men and for the Native American populations they encountered. Though de Soto himself would never leave the region alive, his expedition opened the door to further European exploration and eventual colonization. Over the next 2 centuries, the land that would become Mississippi became a contested territory among European powers. The French, Spanish, and British all sought to control the region, recognizing its strategic importance due to the Mississippi River. The river was not just a natural feature, it was a highway for trade and movement, a crucial link between the interior of the continent and the Gulf of Mexico. In 1682, the French explorer René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de La Salle, claimed the Mississippi River and its surrounding lands for France, naming the territory Louisiana in honor of King Louis XIV. French settlers began to establish outposts and settlements along the river, including what would later become the city of Natchez. These settlements were small but significant, serving as hubs of trade and cultural exchange. Life in these early colonies was not easy. The environment was harsh, with hot, humid summers and frequent flooding. Disease was a constant threat, and relations with Native American tribes could be tense and unpredictable. Yet, despite these challenges, the colonies persisted, driven by the promise of opportunity and the strategic importance of the region. By the mid-18th century, control of the Mississippi region shifted as a result of global conflicts. Following the French and Indian War, France ceded much of its North American territory to Great Britain and Spain. The area that would become Mississippi was divided, with the British controlling the eastern portion and the Spanish controlling the western side of the Mississippi River. Under British rule, the region saw an increase in settlers, particularly from other British colonies. Plantations began to take root, and with them came the introduction of enslaved Africans, who were forced to work the land under brutal conditions. This marked the beginning of a dark and defining chapter in the history of Mississippi, one that would leave a lasting impact on its culture, economy, and society. The fertile soil of the Mississippi River Valley proved ideal for agriculture, particularly for crops like cotton. As plantations expanded, so too did the reliance on enslaved labor. The wealth generated by this system was immense, but it came at an unimaginable human cost. Families were torn apart, lives were controlled and dehumanized, and generations of people were subjected to a system of oppression that would shape the identity of the state for centuries to come. In 1798, the Mississippi Territory was established by the United States, marking a new phase in the region's history. American settlers began to move into the area in greater numbers, bringing with them new ideas, ambitions, and conflicts. The territory grew rapidly, both in population and in economic importance. By 1817, Mississippi had met the requirements for statehood and was admitted to the Union as the 20th state. Its name, derived from the Ojibwe word Mississippi, meaning Great River, was a fitting tribute to the powerful force that had shaped its destiny from the very beginning. As a state, Mississippi quickly became one of the leading producers of cotton in the United States. The invention of the cotton gin made it easier to process cotton, leading to an explosion in production and an even greater demand for enslaved labor. The economy of the state became deeply intertwined with the plantation system, and its social structure reflected this reality. The river continued to play a central role in the life of the state. Steamboats became a common sight on the Mississippi River, transporting goods and people between towns and cities. Ports along the river thrived, and trade flourished. The river was not just a natural boundary, it was the backbone of the state's economy and a symbol of its identity. Yet, beneath the surface of prosperity, tensions were growing. The issue of slavery was becoming increasingly divisive across the United States, and Mississippi was firmly entrenched in the system. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Mississippi seceded from the Union and joined the Confederacy, aligning itself with other Southern states in defense of slavery and states' rights. The war brought devastation to the region. Battles were fought on Mississippi soil, and the Mississippi River became a key strategic objective for Union forces. Control of the river meant control of supply lines and transportation routes. In 1863, the Union victory at Vicksburg gave them control of the Mississippi River, effectively splitting the Confederacy in two and marking a turning point in the war. The end of the Civil War brought the abolition of slavery, but it did not bring immediate equality or justice. The Reconstruction era that followed was a time of significant change and upheaval. Efforts were made to rebuild the South and integrate formerly enslaved people into society as free citizens. However, these efforts were met with resistance, and many of the gains made during this period were later rolled back. Mississippi entered a long period marked by segregation, discrimination, and racial inequality. Laws known as Jim Crow laws enforced segregation and limited the rights of African Americans, creating a system that would persist well into the 20th century. Despite these challenges, African American communities in Mississippi developed rich cultural traditions, including music, religion, and storytelling, that would have a profound influence on American culture as a whole. The Mississippi Delta, in particular, became the birthplace of the blues, a musical genre that expressed the struggles, hopes, and resilience of its people. This music would go on to shape other genres, including jazz, rock and roll, and hip-hop, leaving an indelible mark on the world. As the 20th century progressed, Mississippi became a central battleground in the civil rights movement. Activists, both local and national, worked tirelessly to challenge segregation and secure equal rights for African Americans. Their efforts were often met with violence and resistance, but they persisted, driven by a vision of justice and equality. The legacy of this struggle is still felt today, as Mississippi continues to grapple with its past while striving to build a more inclusive future. The state has made progress in many areas, but the echoes of history remain, reminding us of the challenges that have been overcome and those that still lie ahead. Through it all, the Mississippi River continues to flow, steady, powerful, and unchanging. It has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the clash of cultures, the horrors of war, and the triumphs of human spirit. It is more than just a river, it is the lifeblood of a state, a symbol of endurance, and a reminder of the deep and complex history that has shaped Mississippi into what it is today. And as the waters move slowly southward, carrying with them the stories of the past, they remind us that history is never truly gone. It flows alongside us, shaping our present and guiding our future, just as the Mississippi River has done for countless generations before. As the 19th century unfolded, the state of Mississippi found itself rising to extraordinary economic prominence, fueled by a single crop that would define its destiny: cotton. Known as King Cotton, this plant transformed Mississippi into one of the wealthiest regions in the United States, at least for a select portion of its population. The fertile lands of the Mississippi Delta, enriched by centuries of river flooding, became some of the most productive agricultural soil in the world. To plantation owners, this land represented opportunity and wealth. But beneath this prosperity lay a system built on exploitation, human suffering, and inequality. The expansion of cotton agriculture was rapid and relentless. Following the invention of the cotton gin in 1793, processing cotton became far more efficient, dramatically increasing demand. Mississippi, with its vast expanses of fertile land, became a prime location for cotton cultivation. Planters moved in, establishing large plantations that stretched across the landscape. With them came the forced migration of enslaved Africans, transported in chains from other parts of the South in what became known as the domestic slave trade. By the 1830s and 1840s, Mississippi had become one of the leading cotton producers in the world. Wealth poured into the state, but it was concentrated in the hands of a small elite class of plantation owners. These individuals built grand homes, lived lives of luxury, and wielded immense political power. Meanwhile, the enslaved population lived under brutal conditions, working long hours in the fields, enduring harsh punishments, and being denied even the most basic human rights. The social structure of Mississippi during this time was rigid and deeply unequal. At the top were the wealthy planters, followed by smaller farmers and laborers, and at the very bottom were the enslaved people, who made up a significant portion of the population. This system was not just economic, it was cultural, political, and deeply embedded in every aspect of life in the state. As the nation expanded westward, the question of whether new territories would allow slavery became increasingly contentious. Mississippi, firmly rooted in the institution of slavery, aligned itself with other southern states in defending it. Political tensions between the North and South grew steadily, fueled by differences in economic systems, social structures, and moral perspectives. By the 1850s, it had become clear that the United States was heading toward a crisis. Debates over states' rights and slavery dominated the national conversation. Mississippi's leaders were among the most vocal advocates for the preservation of slavery, viewing it as essential to their way of life and economic survival. In 1860, the election of Abraham Lincoln, a candidate who opposed the expansion of slavery, was seen by many in the South as a direct threat. In response, Mississippi became one of the first states to secede from the Union. On January 9, 1861, it officially declared its secession, joining the newly formed Confederate States of America. The Civil War that followed would bring devastation to Mississippi and the entire nation. The state became a key battleground, not only because of its strategic location but also because of the Mississippi River, which remained a vital artery for transportation and supply lines. One of the most significant campaigns of the war took place in Mississippi, the Vicksburg Campaign. The city of Vicksburg, perched high on bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River, was a Confederate stronghold. Its location made it a critical point of control for the river. Whoever held Vicksburg controlled a major portion of the Mississippi River and, by extension, the movement of goods and troops. Union forces, led by General Ulysses S. Grant, launched a determined campaign to capture the city. The siege of Vicksburg lasted for weeks, with relentless bombardment and dwindling supplies taking a toll on the Confederate defenders and the civilian population. Residents were forced to live in caves dug into the hillsides to escape the constant shelling. Finally, on July 4, 1863, Vicksburg surrendered to Union forces. This victory was a turning point in the Civil War. It gave the Union control of the Mississippi River, effectively splitting the Confederacy in two and crippling its ability to sustain the war effort. For Mississippi, it marked the beginning of the end of the Confederacy's hopes.